following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, and across the moat from Oakland in the northern part of the great state of California. I am blessed to be able to talk to you guys and some of the most interesting people on the face of the earth on a regular basis. And today is no exception. I get to talk to my buddy, baseball maven, historian, and my friend, Alan Blumkin. How are you, Alan?
I'm hanging in there. We had a spring-like day yesterday, but that didn't last.
Yeah, well, we
hit 75 here yesterday, and today it was because they had the St. Patrick's Day parade today, and the weather is always less than ideal on St. Patrick's Day. It's a tradition. It was in the 40s, but it was very, very windy.
Right, and tell people who are listening you're in Brooklyn, New York, and you've had an unusually tough winter. I would say 2 or 3 years in a row now. So when I have a bad day in California, it's 40 degrees and overcast, and when you have a bad day, it could be as low as 2 degrees lately.
Well, it could be worse. It could be in the middle of the country where they've got tons of snow on the ground and blizzard conditions, and
yeah.
And of course, there's no climate change.
Oh, of course, because I know that specifically. Scientists try to tell us there was, but our president insists that there isn't, and he's the president. He must know something, right?
No, he doesn't know very much.
He doesn't know.
All he knows how to do is con.
Yes. Well, I have a terrible prediction for you. Unless the Democratic Party can get it together and he doesn't become either in jail or impeached or what have you,
well,
he stands a good chance of uniting his crazy troops together to win an upcoming election, the way I see it.
Basically, I think Pelosi was right because you don't do an impeachment, which is what the Republicans screwed up with Clinton. You don't do impeachment unless you have a very, very good chance of conviction. Okay, now if they impeach Trump, they won't be able to convict him. The Senate will not convict him as long as they have the majority in the Senate. Okay, the Democrats can only get the Senate back in 2020. And if they get the Senate back, he's got 2 months left.
Well, impeachment.
So it's not worth the energy because they'll never get a conviction.
Well, at this point, we haven't even seen the Mueller report yet.
No, and Lindsey Graham is trying to. The House voted almost unanimously to release it, and Lindsey Graham is trying to block it. But even though he tries to block it, there'll be it'll leak.
It'll absolutely. If Mueller is smart, he'd leak it to the Times now, and be done with it, and just resign. Here it is. Do what you want with it. The Times has it. The people has it. What scares me most about the administration is not their inane policies, is not that he doesn't listen to military generals. He is so after the press that it reminds me of pre-Hitler or pre-World War II Hitler Germany. And what do we do if we're cut off from the press, from the internet? How do we get information?
Well, Nixon, had most of the newspapers on the enemies list.
That's right. That's right. And there's an upcoming documentary.
I know. Yeah, I saw that commercial.
Starts tonight on CNN.
Yeah.
And it's Tricky Dick, And he mentions that in one of his tirades, the Washington Post will never get into this White House again. Well,
no, you and I have lived. I don't necessarily need to see that because you and I and others have lived through it.
That's true, but it's a reminder.
Somebody asked me one time why I didn't go see the Oliver Stone documentary on John Kennedy. I said I lived through it. I really don't need to see it.
Well, there are new things with any of these conspiracy theories and what have you. There's always new things coming to light, and it's worth seeing. It's worth being reminded. It's worth being reminded of the tone of the country. Not that much different than it was when.
I've read several books on Joe McCarthy. I also saw the documentary on him.
Right.
Yeah, because that's on YouTube.
Well,
and that was the first time I ever heard Roy Cohn speak.
Yes, that I remember that documentary, and it's amazing that nowadays that most anything, including all of our programming at Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, every one of our offerings are archived on YouTube. So if anybody's out there, go to Comfortably Zoned on YouTube and subscribe, and you'll get the blessing of hearing some interesting program, to say the least. Alan, you've been interesting and a big part of the network. You are how do you like to be called? Do you like to be called a maven? I know you don't like to be called anything like savant or anything.
No, I'm not an idiot savant.
No,
I know people who are. That the only thing that that there are. Pete Rose is the example of an idiot savant. He was a tremendous baseball player and a genius as a baseball player, but at everything else he was terrible.
Right, at life.
Yeah. I know people in Sabre who I'm not going to name, who the only thing they know is baseball. They know anything else about the outside world, and they basically don't care about it. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to be well-rounded, and you have to look to other things. But I will ask you: is baseball a microcosm of life, or is life a microcosm of baseball?
That I can't answer. I don't get into philosophy.
All right.
I'm sorry. I just don't get into these philosophical discussions.
All right. Let me just ask you this. Take me back to your first baseball card collecting experience.
Okay. I started buying cards in 1951 because there was a thing to do. I was 8. Mm-hmm. And I bought the Bowmans. And then, I became a fan for a few weeks of the Washington Senators because I thought the outfielder that they had, Gil Cohn, was Jewish. Even though it was Coan.
My grandmother thought that Mickey Mendel was Jewish.
Mendel, yeah. And basically, and I started getting interested and then started learning all the players. Also, in 1951, Topps came in with these small cards. There's a set of redbacks, which had a wide distribution, and a set of bluebacks. There's 104 total that have very limited distribution. But the number one card...
Was that a baseball? Was that part of
a baseball game? You could play a game with that. And every player card, they had ball, strike, double, home run, whatever. You could play a game with it.
Well, was the game predicated by dice or?
No, you just deal the cards out. You turn them over one at a time.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
When I was in camp a few years later, I was taught a baseball game played with a regular card deck. Each card meant something.
Ooh.
And you turn them over one at a time. So we actually, 1 year I was in camp, we have four-team league. You know, we picked players and kept records and stuff like that. But but that game was very primitive. What I remember about the top set, the red back, the first card was Yogi Berra, who was also the number 2 card in the Bowman set. And so I said, who the heck is this? So the first time I really watched was the World Series of 1951. I knew about the Bobby Thompson game, but I was still in school when that ended. And I remember we were over at my grandparents' house the last Sunday of the regular season, and it was, I think it must have been Rosh Hashanah. So I listened to the Dodger-Philly game that went 14 innings in 1951, where Robinson hit a home run to win it, off Robin Roberts in the 14th inning. Jackie Robinson made a sensational catch in the 12th inning, which would have scored the winning run for the Phillies and given the Giants the pennant right then and there.
Right.
So 52 was the 1952
Phillies, the Whiz Kids.
Yeah, that was the year after the Whiz Kids.
Yeah, but
they fell apart. They came in 5th for a variety of reasons. So the 51 cards, what I learned much later on was I got very interested in the Topps Bowman Wars. They started in 1951, and several players in the Redbacks who were in the 1950 Bowman set were not in the top set in 51. Mm-hmm. Ralph Kiner was one of them. Stan Musial wasn't in any cards in 50 and 51. In fact, it turned out to be the 1950 set was the first, Bowman set was the most complete set of those early years, because they had everybody except Musial. And that was also the last year that
Jack held out on Bowman, he held out on Topps later on.
Yeah.
I guess he just didn't want to be on a card.
No, he was on a Bowman in 52 and 53, but he wouldn't come back, and he wasn't on a regular, Topps Bowman card until he was on the All-Star. They issued an All-Star card of him in 1958. Now, 1950 was also the last time that Jackie Robinson was on a Bowman card. He was not on either card in 1951, although custom cards have been made of him. And been made of him for almost all his missing Bowman years. And
there's almost a hobby now, Al, of custom.
There was a hobby back then. I know, custom cards, because what happened in the early 50s with the Topps Bowman Wars, there were players superstars that were on one and not the other, or not on either.
Right.
So a few years ago, people started making custom cards to fill the gaps in.
Right. Do you think that takes away from the hobby, or do you think it?
No, I think it enhances it, because everybody knows they're not real. They're not on. The stock is very thin. I have a number of them. The stock is thin, and right. People who know that these things are not real. And nobody, right. You can't try to pass them off as real. When Topps reprinted the 52, 53, and 54 Bowman sets, Top sets, they made them smaller because the card size was shifted downward, and that was starting in 1957.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no way.
Let me ask you this: are they starting to put a price on those cards, say on the internet? If you wanted to go to eBay or
for a custom card?
Yeah.
Yeah, they cost about $345 a piece. You throw in the shipping because it's only one or two. It's if you order one card or multiple cards, the shipping is 95 cents. So you're talking $440 for one card.
So
like I just got two.
Making a profit by doing these things.
There's not. I don't think there's that many like me that go all the way back, because most of the stuff they put out there is relatively recent. But the thing is I just this
fans that are looking for history.
Yeah, I just got this week to custom Bowmans, 55 Bowmans. That was the TV set of Duke Snider and Jackie Robinson, who were not in the regular Bowman, in the original Bowman set from that year. They're smaller, and they match in with the when Topps put out a Dodger Archive set in 1955. They put out all the Bowmans, and Snider and Robinson are not in there. So these custom cards people, they made Snider and Robinson, and you can stick them into the box with the archives because the archives are all the same size. And they stopped the archives in 1950 after 1956 because that was the last year of the bigger cards. So the 57 Brooklyn Dodgers are in the standard, what's been the standard card size for the last 62 years.
Right, and they didn't want to have to go through the problem of retooling.
No, when Topps came out with the 52 reprint, I bought a couple because I had never seen most of the high numbers. Because the story with that is they issued them in the early summer, and kids were either away or in camp or whatever, so they had no audience for them. And the Topps wound up a bunch of years later, dumping a bunch, loaded them into the Gowanus Canal because they had no room in their warehouse for them anymore. That's why these things are so.
They had no idea that.
No idea.
Creating a shortage.
No, they had no idea. This is before everything exploded into the big money that it is now. So in the first, in the high numbers of the 52 set, you have Mantle. That's the Mantle card that goes for $1 million now if it's in great shape. Jackie Robinson, Bobby Thompson, Roy Campanella, Leo DeRocher, Pee Wee Reese, Eddie Matthews is the last card, and that's a premium because there's not too many out there that are in pristine shape because people who have them put the rubber bands around them.
Okay. You mentioned Eddie Matthews, best third baseman in the National League in my day when I was.
He was the best third baseman because they used to have Pike Traynor. I went through this with David Nemec when we did the 30s teams, I think. Pike Traynor, for one reason or another, was considered the best third baseman ever, up until Eddie Matthews, and Eddie Matthews is considered the best third baseman up until the late 70s and 80s, where you had Mike Schmidt, Wade Boggs, and George Brett.
Well, Mike Schmidt, I think now is
considered... No, he's considered the best.
Okay, but of his time, of his era, Matthews...
Yeah, he's considered the best of all time.
Now, the second and third best third baseman in the National League at that time, in my opinion, was in this order: Ken Boyer and then Santo in the National League.
Yeah.
All right. Why is Ken Boyer not in the Hall of Fame and Santo is?
Everything is political with the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
I mean, because Santo had a campaign for him. Ken Boyer's been dead since 1982.
Right.
Okay. But Santo was alive up until a few years ago, and there was a big push to get him in. There were people.
He was an announcer and it kind of.
Yeah, and very popular, and he used to do that jump in the air, and he had diabetes, overcame diabetes to put out a major league career. But the thing is that there was a campaign over in 1995 to get Richie Ashburn in.
Right.
In Philadelphia, and they got enough petitions and enough everything to get him in, and he got in 2 years before he passed away, so he was there to enjoy it.
Right.
But the thing
sadly, there are some that don't get that privilege.
Yeah, and there's
one of them.
There are some players that are in there. I went through with David Nemec on this on one of the podcasts that were put in through the Veterans Committee, primarily by Frankie Frisch, who put 11 players in there, most of whom don't belong. And that's why, because of my friends and I have knowledge of the whole thing, is why we are so furious about the Harold Baines election.
Right.
It was his birthday yesterday. There's a guy who has a site called Discussion of All Things Baseball. He puts out every player's birthday every year. So I didn't go on there yesterday, but I went in there today, and I saw he listed Harold Baines. So I put down Harold Baines deserves a plaque for playing in Cooperstown as much as I do.
Yeah, well, people
and the fact that he's
versatility, yeah.
And the fact that he's in, and Minnie Minoso, who was 10 times the player that Baines could ever hope to be, is not in.
Yeah.
It's infuriating.
Yeah, I think Minoso, the more I think about it, Minoso's being out is more of an injustice than anyone, including Gil Hodges.
Well, I'm in a group that on Facebook that has over 2,000 members that has a Gil Hodges for the Hall of Fame. And if you look at it closely, if you look at his competitors for first base during the decade of the 50s, the only one, and you don't count Musial, because Musial was more of an outfielder during that decade. The only one that compares to him is Ted Kluszewski, and Kluszewski only had 4 or 5 years before his back did him in, and he became a part-timer.
Right.
So Hodges was the best.
He was a definitive slug, what they called a slugger in the mid-50s. I mean, he was
Hodges,
a guy.
If you compare Hodges to the rest of the people during his era, first baseman during the American League didn't have anybody in that class. I mean, the best American League first baseman during the 50s is probably Mickey Vernon.
Right.
Or Vic Wertz after he went to first base.
Good, solid ball player.
Yeah, but they're not the best.
No, they're not Hall of Famers. They were not. And interesting, when they looked for all-time 1950s first baseman, they had to go to people like Stan Musial, who played it very sparingly. He played left field most of the time. And Frank Robinson, I think.
No, he hardly ever played there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Frank Robinson.
You're looking at Mickey Vernon in the American League. You're looking at I can go down all the teams, and Eddie Robinson for a couple of years, Ferris Fang for a couple of years, Vic Wertz for a couple of years, but it's not on the level of Kluszewski or Hodges.
Right.
Now, this stuff I can discuss to my heart's content because that's the decade I'm most familiar with.
The 50s.
50s, yeah. Because that's when I stopped buying the cards. Much to when I went away to college, in 1960, I stopped buying them. I thought it was childish.
Right.
So
now you wish you had them back.
Now I regret it, of course. But it's there are people, and my mother used to, when the new ones came out, I had to get rid of the old ones.
Yeah, there was almost so much space you could have for fun.
Yeah, it's like this guy Frank Barning.
Much time you can dedicate yourself to fun. That was the post.
This guy Frank Barning runs a site that I'm on. He used to put out a hobby magazine. He put up a picture of a bicycle with a crumpled Frank Robinson card, in the spokes.
Yeah.
And he titled the post "An American Tragedy."
Yeah, a number of reasons. His passing recently was
but this was several months ago. This was before he passed. But just the idea of putting an Aaron or a Mays or a Mantle or a Musial or Williams any of those types into a spoke. Yeah.
We had no idea of commodity. No. We had no idea that there would be a
Well, if I had, as I said on one of the other
craze.
Yeah. As I said on one of the other programs, if I had two Mickey Mantles and you had two Joe Blows, and I needed Joe Blow and you needed Mickey Mantle, you traded because there's no intrinsic value in them back then. And they used to come out March 15th. There wasn't. Now they put them out in December, and then they issue a traded set in the about June or July with all the players who had changed uniforms.
Yeah, they've been doing that for years.
They've been doing that since 1981.
And a lot of times they used to airbrush the...
Yeah, oh, sure. Well, the airbrushing in the early years, I mean, the first stage of airbrushing, all you have to look is when they put out the 53 set, and half that's when the Braves moved 2 weeks before the season from Boston to Milwaukee. So half the players came out with the B on the cap, and the others, about half of them came out with the M, and the M is airbrushed very badly.
Yes, and they had, to their defense, they had no idea where these guys were going to be. What they made the mistake of doing is not taking pictures of guys without caps. They later started
did that because they lost the right for a number of years to use the logos. Because those disappeared from the Topps cards after 1965 for years.
Oh, did not realize that.
Yeah, so they couldn't use the caps, which in what you could tell, if a player who moved it and they still have him, with his new team in the old uniform.
Well, the first I noticed that was in the 58 set. I collected the Braves in that set, the Milwaukee Braves. They had just won in 57. They beat your hated Yankees.
Your hated Yankees.
Your Yankees, my hated Yankees.
Yeah.
At that time. Now I've grown to respect and love their memories as I have the Dodgers.
No, I have with the Brooklyn Dodgers because I hated them when I was a kid.
Right, but now you realize none
of them. Yeah,
obviously.
The older you get, you realize that,
right.
that...
But it was the Milwaukee Braves, and the trade they made was for guys like Bob Buell with the Cubs and... who was
they sent him to the Cubs.
And Casey Wise.
Yeah, Casey Wise was terrible. He couldn't hit the ball to save himself.
But my point was, in the uniforms, they had him on a Brave card with the Cubs uniforms, and maybe they'd airbrush. Yeah,
that's what they did for a number of years. They had them all in the old uniforms.
Right. And then sometimes they just give up, and it would be a blank cap.
Yeah, well, the one that struck me was when the Yankees got Bobby Shantz in early 57 in a trade with the A's before the season started. His card in that set has the NY on the chest, but there's no pinstripes. They they did the NY over an A's uniform.
Yes.
It wasn't only the caps; they did everything if they could. They had to.
Seeing Shantz in a Yankee uniform was like seeing Sal Magli in a Yankee uniform. It was just...
what about Sal Magli in a Dodger uniform?
Oh, that hurt. That hurt this 7-year-old or 10-year-old kid who grew up loving Sal Magli and was an avid Giant fan.
Yeah.
All of a sudden he's a Dodger.
There's a guy who passed away several years ago in California. Out in L.A. somewhere. He ran a site on 52 Topps. It's still the site is still up on the thing, and he put out cards, of the smaller size, comparable to the reprint set of all the top players that weren't in. So I found this out accidentally I was just searching on Facebook. And searching the web, and I found this site, and he had already put out Williams and Musial. I'm sorry, Williams and Joe DiMaggio, even though Joe DiMaggio were retired. So I contacted him, and he would put these cards up every month, and he put up a very easy quiz to anybody who knew the 52 top set. So he then put out Musial and Kiner. And I contacted him, and he was impressed by the way I knew the set. And I sponsored several cards. This has happened all before I got sick 5 years ago.
Right.
And we put out cards of Furillo and Newcomb to complete the Dodgers. We put out cards of Magley and Lockman to complete the Giants. We put out cards of Casey Stengel, Whitey Ford, Vic Raschi, and Bobby Brown to complete the Yankees. We put out cards on Satchel Paige and Marty Marion for the Browns, Johnny Logan and Lou Burdett for the Braves, Hal Newhouser for the Tigers, and a few other. Nellie Fox was a big one because he was not in that set. He was a Bowman exclusive. All these guys I mentioned until the merger were in '56 were Bowman exclusives. Vic Raschi never appeared on a Topps card because 1955 was his last card. So we filled most of the gaps.
Right.
Now you can buy those.
Time is our enemy. We're at the end of it, but I want to tell you that this subject will never bore me. Baseball cards, nostalgia going back into baseball history. Love having you, Alan.
Okay.
And,
Al Anderson, when he's ready, and I plan to do probably David also, plan to do a podcast on the 52 top set.
Beautiful. Include me if you'd like. You're always welcome to do that. And
by the way, George Case messaged me, and I'm going to be on with him tomorrow at noon.
Beautiful. That's what I was hoping for. It's one-on-one with you on the show on the Comfortably Zone Network that we're talking about is In Case You're Wondering with George Case. So, and he's going one-on-one with you, and I'll be there to produce it. Thank you, Al, for being a valued friend.
Okay, so I call this number and this code for tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Okay.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Ralph.
And thank you for listening, everybody. It's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I will leave you with some thoughts. This could make your life better. Keep your dreams wet, keep your humor dry, and keep your kids off the laps of clerics that wear dresses. Now, even 2 out of 3 to start would be nice. But do that. It may work.
Ralph, I want to say one last thing before I go. This is for the Met fans out there.
Okay.
There were no Topps cards. Yeah, there are no Topps cards of Rusty Staub in 72 and 73. He got into a dispute with Topps. I had no idea what it was about. But there are custom cards that have been made up for those 2 years for Rusty Staub because he's just not in the cards at all for them, those 2 years. Good
tip for Met fans to collect baseball cards. And I thank you again, Alan Blumkin. I'm Ralph Zig Tycho, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Be well, Al. The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.